I greet you, people from the future. I am recording this in the past, and so when you hear it, I will no longer be here.
Nice.
I understand this may confuse you. Take a moment.
All right.
This is what I work with.
All right, guys, this is Caleb with White Metal Games here, and we have a special podcast tonight. We have the makers and creators of Proxy Army. Is it Proxy Army LLC? Is that correct?
Just Proxy Army Games.
Just Proxy Army Games. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves both for the camera for our YouTube channel and for our podcast?
All right, I'm Alan Clark, co-founder of Proxy Army Games. I was a restaurateur before I did this, and now I'm a game dev.
I'm Tristan, co-founder of Proxy Army Games. I did 6 years of engineering and then realized I was going to be a terrible engineer. So now I'm doing this. I'm a game dev.
So guys, tonight the podcast is going to we're going to focus on Proxy Army, but specifically Proxy Army is a 3D game printing company, and this is sort of a new industry. And I know there's a lot of interest in it. It's sort of a trending topic in gaming to see what 3D printing can bring to the table, and in addition to that, where we think that the industry is going. So can you just sort of in a few words sum us up what is Proxy Army and what you guys are aiming to do, I guess?
Sure. We are building Proxy War, our new... Look at the camera. We are building Proxy War, our new gaming miniature 3D printing service. So as an example, say you want a custom miniature of your D&D character. You could log onto our website, grab a torso, grab limbs, clip them on, clip on a head, set expression, drag and drop equipment onto them, and create a fully custom miniature exactly of your character. You can also do the same thing with tabletop war games, board game pieces, or any other tabletop game miniature.
So specifically, does that mean the Proxy Army is a company that's going to be doing, like, let's say, custom role-playing miniatures and custom wargaming miniatures and bits and that sort of thing? Or are you going to have like a full system or like your own game, and then this is just sort of icing on the cake?
Definitely the first one. We do have our own game, which is also called Proxy War, which we made so that you could play with any miniature you can print. But we definitely do miniatures for RPGs or other tabletop games. Like, for instance, in talking with Pathfinder, a D&D variant, if you're not familiar with it. One complaint we've gotten is that Tiefling is one of the core races, but there are not really any good, Tiefling miniatures. So what you will be able to do on our service is log on, grab Tiefling, customize the expression, customize the gear, customize the weapon and pose, and if you're a D&D player, you can now have a fully custom miniature of your character.
Now, when you say customize the expression, do you mean like you're going to be able to like change their facial expression, like from a smile to a frown, that kind of thing?
You can drag and drop various points. The models are what's known as rigged. They can tell various points that should stretch, should bend, should move, should twist. They can do everything from the eyebrows. You can furrow them. You can stretch the smile out. You can make, a Joker-ish, Cheshire-ish expression if you want. You can bend the arm, you can pose it exactly how you want. It even knows which way an elbow shouldn't bend. And you can set it to bend and break the arms if you really want to.
So this kind of sounds like video design software, like for like an RPG. Like if I was playing World of Warcraft and I wanted to make my own like dwarven character or whatever. Is it kind of like that, where I can shift like their hair color, their facial color, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Well, it's not with painted, of course. It's an unpainted miniature.
Yes, if you also had the option to drag the dwarf's head off and turn him into a robot.
Okay.
It's a lot more flexibility than
Okay. So it seems like you just have seemingly limitless options.
Yep.
Okay. So why did you guys decide you wanted to get into the 3D printing arena in the first place? Like, what brought... I mean, you're both gamers, I imagine.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a story behind it. So I think I mentioned earlier that I did engineering school until I realized I was going to be a terrible engineer. So as I had a few months left before I graduated school, no job prospects, and things were looking pretty grim. To pass the time between impending unemployment, I figured, well, while I'm in the school, I might as well take the time when I have access to the school's 3D printers to make bootleg miniatures for a certain tabletop game, which I will not name on a podcast. So I started modeling them just so I could print them for myself. Friends started asking, oh, while you're doing this, could you go ahead and print a custom mini for me, for my army? I said, yes, sure. Eventually, the requests started piling up to the point I didn't have time and had to start saying no. And that's when people said, oh, well, if I paid you $40, could you model this custom miniature for me so I can print it? And that's when I realized there was a business in custom printing models, and jumped from there right into this.
How long ago was all that happening? Was this like the last couple of years?
6 months.
6 months ago. All right.
Yes.
So this is fairly recently.
Yes.
So you went from engineering school, and then you were doing these sort of custom models for friends, that sort of thing, and then you suddenly launched a business. So can you tell a little bit about that transition, how you decided to just sort of create a business, and maybe how you guys met and how you guys got together?
A few different questions there. I'll let Alan field the one about how we met.
All right. Let's see. About 5-6 years ago, I had just gotten out of college. I was looking for a D&D group, basically, and I was getting into Exalted, and I found this online Exalted campaign where I made the most broken character I've ever played, and I bumped into the other most broken character I'd ever met, and the player and I stayed in touch. I ended up running a 4 or 5 year campaign with him as my star player in it afterward, and we've been long time friends. And just, hey, you wanna maybe make a miniatures game? And I contributed some core mechanics on the spot, and that's how it was born.
Okay, so that was how you guys first got together. Were you guys physically in the same town when this happened?
No.
Okay, so you guys were just completely states apart, and then you just sort of one of you moved closer to the other so you could actually jump on this, or?
Everyone in the company started out absolutely diaspora. We had people in New York, Brazil, Russia. I was in St. Louis at the time. You were in Boston?
Hanover, New Hampshire.
Gotcha. And we all, not all of us are in the same place, but we all moved to Durham because, frankly, it is a wonderful, great place. The Research Triangle is a great community. It has we found out after moving here, high density of game stores per capita. It's one of the highest in the country.
There's a lot of game stores here.
Yeah,
it's great.
So it proved to be fertile ground for Proxy Army games.
Can you tell us a little bit about the decision to move to Durham? I know that we've talked about you guys were invited to some sort of like program where you competed against other small businesses.
Yes.
There you go.
For those of you on YouTube, Alan is wearing his Groundworks shirt. Groundworks is a business incubator located in Durham in what's called the American Underground. An incubator is essentially free office space which is given to a startup along with advice, which is probably the more valuable part, to help a young startup get off the ground. They have put us up quite generously, and they've offered a lot of really helpful advice from people who know what they're doing on the business
Now,
side.
there's a timetable there, right? You guys are only invited to attend there for a short period of time?
Yeah, it's about 3 months.
Okay. And then after that, there's an option to renew if your business is going well?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
If they like the goals that we've set out and the goals among those goals that we've met, they invite us to stay for another, I think it's 1 month each, again and again. Yeah.
Is there a finite number of months you can do that for? Or eventually are they just like, well, as long as it takes?
Their policy is you can stay as long as they think you are making substantive progress and obviously need the free rent.
Yep.
Who funds that the Groundwork organization?
The state of North Carolina through a fund called the NC Idea Fund.
Nice.
The NC Idea Fund is designed to encourage technological entrepreneurism in the Research Triangle, things like new chip designs, new tech companies, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But they realized since they are only for tech companies, there were a lot of good entrepreneurial ideas that they were having to reject because they are not tech.
So how many tech companies are in that space right now?
In that space, in the adjoining 24?
And how many, I guess, retailers or people who are going to actually make a product?
Oh man! All
One.
right.
Us.
Yes.
So one?
Now we
So
are
one
not,
out of 20.
We are in the Groundworks Accelerator. We're actually not in the what's the other one?
The Triangle Accelerator is the one that does tech companies.
Yes. We are in the Groundworks, which is the side project, the ones that are not technically tech, but still are good entrepreneurial ideas that they wanted to help support.
Okay.
So we are the only one actually in either group that is making a physical product. Everyone else is all apps, is all digital, is all let's provide a service to other businesses. We're all about making a product.
So you guys were all divided. You were all over the country or all over the world in some cases, and you got together through gaming, through Exalted. You decided you wanted to create a world. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the world of, I guess, Proxy War, and what is that world about? Like, what is it? A fantasy? Is it steampunk? Is it sci-fi?
So it's sci-fantasy.
Okay.
Our goal in creating the world for Proxy Army was that since this is a setting where players can print any model they like, you can conceivably show up with any army. I can show up with a very serious, very gritty sort of turn of the century steampunk army, and you can show up with ninja catgirl pirates.
Okay.
And we wanted a setting where these two armies could fight each other without it descending into farce or comedy. And the way we've done that is we've made it a sci-fantasy setting that essentially focuses on the fact that the galaxy is big. You can rule 99% of the galaxy, and there's 1 million stars you have never visited. So it is a setting that essentially, while you can have these big political movements, these large empires that rule vast swaths of the galaxy, there are always dark corners or rocks that have not been overturned. And when you overturn them, you can find minor empires, lesser powers, undiscovered races, strange technology. So it is a setting where anyone can really run into anyone, but you still have this larger, more interesting world.
Yes.
So when you first start the game, like for example, if I was in a game store and I saw Proxy War, what would a blister or a box look like? If I can have anything, how does that process work?
Gotcha. With our actual core conflict in the setting, because as much as there is so much room for everyone to include anything, any rock to overturn, any army you can imagine, the setting doesn't really speak to people without some kind of central conflict.
Sure.
And we've embodied that in the 3 core races, the Vana, the Nakara, and the Human Solar Federation. Those 3 factions are the main conflict in Proxy War, and you'll see those in our starter packs. The Vana are a race of, we would see them as plant people, effectively.
Technical pacifists.
Technical pacifists, yes. Just because I genetically engineered a horrible plague race to go out and kill you, that does not mean I killed you, so my hands are clean.
When you
That's
say
their whole
plant
ethos.
people, do you mean like Swamp Thing plant people? Or do you mean more like people who like plants?
The
Closer to the former.
Their race's fundamental setup, which provides, we think, a pretty interesting backstory for them, is they start as ambulatory, something of a forest sprite look to them, but eventually become sessile and become an immobile plant. What has therefore driven most of their race's history is that if you want a retirement plan, you have to clear some land by one means or another. So they are a race that is violently protective of its space. They've dealt with this with a philosophy of pacifism, but it is very much rules as written pacifism. I would never kill you, but my robot buddy might kill you, but that, I don't see how that reflects on me personally.
Okay.
So they offer a mix of high ideals and the sort of gung-ho militarism you expect in what is fundamentally a war game. The other 2 factions, the humans and the Nakara, play into that. The Nakara are one of the many servitor races they created to kill for them so that they could keep their hands free of blood, who have revolted against them and are now trying to find their own place in the galaxy.
When you say servitors, do you mean like an AI kind of thing? Like a robot race? Or?
No.
Okay.
The Nakara are essentially a psychic field that you bring other races and other beings into. They become Nakara when they are sort of assimilated.
A hive mind.
Yes, they're sort of a hive mind. They still have a certain sense of individuality. And within that hive mind, there are a number of other conquered races that the Nakara themselves, the original Nakara, whose shape and identity are now lost to time, conquered and brought into the Nakara's sort of hive mind.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're...
So like a psychic empire kind of scouring
Yes.
the stars.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
And they are sort of the attack dogs of the Vana in their great galactic sort of...
Hegemony.
Yes, their hegemony. And that's what they were up until the more recent upheaval in the social system in the setting.
They specifically their psychic hive mind ate a species with enough of a sense of individuality or enough of a sense of free will that enabled them to shrug off the Vana's control, and they resented having been used as pawns this entire time.
Okay.
Enter into this humans, who are the weakest of the starting factions, and they know it. Putting them in something of a position of galactic opportunists or the adventuring spirit. They are the weakest of the factions, both technologically and militarily, but the other 2 great races are far too concerned with each other to notice or care about humanity. And so this is humanity's time to expand to the stars, to claim as much territory, technology, and wealth as they can.
What scale is this game going to be in? Is this going to be 15, 25, 28 millimeter?
28 millimeter.
Okay, cool. So you've got 3 different factions. They're all bloodthirsty, and it's all a territorial game. what about when you said there's going to be a lot of player options for design? So can you give an example of how one of these races could be changed and I guess just modified based on player whim?
Sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So one thing we wanted was for players, because you don't want a standing start. You don't want to have to go from I've never played this game before to creating an entirely custom army. So every core faction has 24 custom units 24 units, including 6 slots for custom units, which right now we're calling a mercenary detachment. So you can field a Solar Federation army that contains 6 whatevers, any unit you can imagine, that is their mercenary detachment.
Okay.
So that means you can gradually introduce custom units. Now, this is done officially, where, for instance, the Solar Federation comes with a number of different mercenary sub-factions you can clip onto any of their armies, ranging from humans who have genetically modified themselves to have special abilities, to mercenary subgroups, to pirate raiders, that sort of thing. But players can easily create their own. Like, for instance, if you wanted to play an infestor style army that infects and seizes control of humans, you can buy a Solar Federation army, paint them gray with a somewhat zombie-like look to them, and then add to them up to a half dozen units, which are your alien monstrosities that are controlling them, and thereby create your own variant faction without needing to make a whole army from scratch.
So if I wanted to do this sort of alien infestation thing, how would I go about that? Do I just send an email to the company saying, hey, I want zombies? Or is this more like, what's the relationship between the client and the customer in terms of game design?
Well, there's 2 different ways we go about this. One of them is the personalized unit, and the other is the original. The personalized unit is you log onto our database of model parts, and you select, as he mentioned earlier, torsos, weapons, limbs, chassis, mutations, powers, technology. You can find little, not glowing, but little orbs with infection things that spread out. You can clip them onto the model at any point, and you can print it with that. Or if you can't find exactly what you're looking for, if you want, say, a half-rotted away head for a human army, but you can't find that, which is going to be extremely unlikely. But for an example, in our database,
Zombies are popular. I think we'll have that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have zombies. But I'm using as an example a half-rotted away head with teeth showing, etc. If you can't find that, there's an entire section of our website that is dedicated just to original units. You submit a 1 or 2 paragraph description. We put that in our queue. We get back to you with about a 10 to 12 questionnaire. We get back to you with a 10 to 12 question questionnaire that clarifies your concept and helps us pick out which of our design staff would be best suited towards working with you on your concept. We partner you with 3 members of our design staff, a character artist, an illustrator, and a 3D modeler. They take you from that description and that questionnaire to, okay, I've got this first round of concept art, here's 10 or 12 things, look them over, tell me what parts of these you like. Okay, they get that feedback from that round, they produce another round, they get the feedback from that round, and so it goes until you've got one thing you are perfectly happy with. Now, all the other rounds of concept art, you don't have to discard them. We hang on to those, and you can set up to work on one of those as another original unit later. But we take that one, we send it to orthographics, and then we send it to the 3D model, and you go from your 2-paragraph description of a random plague-rotted zombie head to holding the actual prototype in your hand.
That sounds very cool in concept. I think that, I guess one of the concerns I would have from my perspective would be, how much time is that going to take your designers to go through, and specifically, like, let's say we want to design this zombie clown ballerina thing, and I'm going to pay whatever that model's going to cost. It's a blister pack. Let's say it's $20. How many hours are your designers spending dedicated to that to basically make the same $20 I would spend if I just bought like a clam pack that was already there on the shelf?
So having fully original content created for you is extra. The price for how much it is varies.
Okay.
So for instance, just to have a rotting zombie head or a custom weapon or a tutu to put an existing zombie model in, that might be another $20.
Okay.
Having an entirely custom unit created from scratch, there's nothing in the database like this, we're going to make it out of nothing. That goes all the way up to $430.
Okay.
What we do, though, because we know that is definitely at the expensive end to make it a little more affordable, is whenever you commission original content, it goes into the database and you get a percentage of the sales every time someone else uses it. Like, let's say you commission a zombie head. $20. That zombie head goes into the database. And whenever someone uses that zombie head on one of their models, you get a small percentage of that sale. So that way people continue contributing popular original content, get rewarded for it.
Isn't that kind of giving away quite a bit of your profit, though, in theory?
Not necessarily.
It's proportionate to how much it's ordered. So what we learned pretty early on in this is that we are not the guardians of good taste. We do not have perfect psychic knowledge of what the gaming community wants. If you commission something that 10,000 people want and they order 10,000 models of it, yeah, giving you a percentage of the sale of a percentage of 10,000 sales is a bit. But on the other hand, you basically just got us 10,000 sales with your idea. So we can't really see that as a bad thing overall.
In addition to that, because people who are creators of good content are therefore incentivized to keep making good content, we're probably going to be watching you closely and seeing if you would like a spot on our design staff if you do something that runaway successful.
That's very cool. It seems like that's a very just a transparent relationship between the player and the designer. And unlike a lot of games where you're stuck with whatever the designers put out there, you love it, you hate it, whatever. This seems like it's sort of an ultimate opportunity just to kind of really build wherever you want. Do you feel like this could grow, I guess, out of control a little bit? Like you're going to have tables of people playing with like evil killer clown zombies, and then how are you going to take your opponent seriously in that instance? Like, how do you think the culture of the game will develop around this seemingly limitless,
Part of the way that we've sort of taken that into account is that, one, we accepted early on that we are not the guardians of good taste. What people want to play is what people want to play. And we've also worked very hard to craft a setting where these things can be taken in context but are not the core of the game. Yes, you can have any army you want, but if you're going to play zombie, ninja, pirate, cat, girl robots from the far, far future, you can do that. We're not going to knock you for it. We are not going to say no. But your content won't be fully, perfectly, completely represented in the overall game simply because it is more niche. It is by default more niche.
So one of the things we really want continuing with that is a really active relationship between the game world and what the players are playing. So one of the things that has irritated us about many games out there is that the lore is unchanging. We intend to have a much more dynamic relationship. Like, let's say one player comes up with a new army concept. He comes up with a renegade human faction of space pirates, which are outrageously popular with the fan base. People love playing them, people love creating stories about them, people love creating new models for them. We can just go ahead and introduce that. We can say that there's a splinter pirate faction of the Solar Federation Navy, which is now one of the core factions in the game, which now anyone can play, which now has a place in the lore. So based on what players are playing, based on what how the battles are going, we can adjust the lore to reflect that. So if you create an awesome, Splinter Solar Federation pirate army, something that players can take seriously, something that really fits in the fluff, something that's just fun to have on the table, that can get integrated into the story. It can have a much bigger role in the lore overall. It can really become an integral part of the game. If you play zombie, ninja, ballerina, cat girls from the future, that army is playable, but it will never appear in the lore except as a vague reference to there are some truly strange things in the dark corners of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Now, just out of curiosity, because I think this sounds really amazing. I mean, from my point of view, it sounds like it just sounds great. But here's the thing: like, let's say that these zombie robot pirates or whatever get really, really popular. At what point does the line between the designer and the player become kind of gray? Like, let's say you develop this faction. Do you feel like you're going to be liable if someone decides, like, hey, I designed that faction, I want a bigger portion of the profits? Do you feel like you're kind of setting yourself up to be kind of in the line of fire here? Like let's say I'm a vindictive player, and I take my happy whatever 1% of my sales, and I'm very satisfied with that for a while. But then after a while, I decide, well, I'm kind of a designer for the company, I should get more. Like, how do you feel there's any risk involved in that?